Turning 50 wasn't as dramatic as the greeting cards made it out to be. No crisis, no wild parties, just a quiet acceptance that I'd made it to a season of stillness. Evan and I had just moved into a modest lake house nestled against a thick tree line and overlooking the water. The air smelled of pine and wet stone, and I had finally gotten my dream of sipping coffee on a porch that didn't face traffic. Life was calm, comfortable, maybe even perfect, if not for that one odd structure on our property, the shed. The real estate agent barely mentioned it during the walkthrough. It's just a storage shed, locked. The previous owner never used it, and no one's had a key for years. We were told it was probably full of old paint cans and rotted wood. A bit of mystery, sure, but nothing we cared to deal with immediately. Still, something about it unsettled me. It wasn't just the way ivy clung to its sides like fingers, or how it faced away from the house like it didn't belong. It was Evan's reaction. Whenever I brought up the idea of having a locksmith come check it out, he'd shrug and say something like, "Why bother? Just junk in there." And that was that. For a man who once dismantled our entire dishwasher just to see how the water jets worked, his lack of curiosity seemed unnatural. I chalked it up to stress. Evan had been distant lately. More late-night work calls, more solitary walks around the lake, and more absent-minded nods when I asked him simple things. He said he was just adjusting to semi-retirement. I believed him. Mostly. Then, yesterday, everything shifted. It was around 3:30 in the afternoon. I had just returned from the farmer's market with a bag of blueberries and fresh basil when I saw something taped to the front door. A small brass key. No note. No tape residue. Just a single old-fashioned key, stuck dead center on the door with perfect symmetry, like someone had taken their time placing it. Evan had gone into town to grab some sandpaper and caulk. He wasn't due back for at least an hour. I stood on the porch staring at the key. I didn't even need to guess what it unlocked. My hand closed around it almost automatically. I walked through the yard, past the garden, down the gentle slope to the tree-covered edge where the shed sat like a forgotten tombstone. I hadn't been this close in weeks. The door was covered in moss, and a padlock hung from the latch like a dead weight. I inserted the key. It turned with a satisfying click. The inside was dark, damp, and smelled like mildew and earth. I fumbled with my phone until the flashlight came on and swept the beam across the room. Boxes, dozens of them, all stacked neatly along the walls. No dust, no cobwebs, each one labeled in a handwriting I didn't recognize. Names, years, and strange symbols. And then I saw it. One box in the center of the shed, placed like it had been waiting. It was newer than the others. On top of it sat a photograph. I picked it up carefully. It was Evan, young, maybe in his late 20s. He was smiling, one arm wrapped around a woman I didn't recognize, dark hair, kind eyes, and standing in front of them was a little girl, no older than 4 or 5, wearing a bright yellow raincoat and holding a red balloon. I flipped the photo over. Our first family trip, Bindoku's used Doksansekis. My stomach turned. I met Evan in 2002, and we never had children. I must have stared at that photograph for 10 minutes before I could even breathe properly. My hands were shaking and my chest felt tight, like the walls were closing in. I looked around at the other boxes, suddenly overwhelmed by the realization that I knew nothing about what was in them, or about the man I had spent nearly 2 decades loving. I lifted the lid of the center box. Inside were children's toys, an old stuffed giraffe, a well-worn picture book with bent corners, a set of alphabet blocks. Everything smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. Beneath the toys was a folder. I opened it. There were medical records, photos, report cards, a birth certificate. Name, Lila Mae Porter. Mother, Samantha Reese. Father, Evan Porter. My knees buckled and I sank to the dirt floor. Lila, a daughter? Evan had a daughter, and never once, not in all our years of marriage, had he said her name. I didn't hear Evan return. The sound of the car door slamming brought me back to the present. My instinct was to run, to hide the box, the photo, everything, but there was no time. I slipped the folder back in the box, closed it gently, and stepped out into the fading afternoon light. Evan was halfway across the yard when he saw me. His face froze. "You opened it," he said flatly. I nodded, the key dangling from my hand. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, barely recognizing the sound of my voice. He looked down at the grass. "Because I thought I could leave it behind." "She's your daughter." "She was," he said, voice cracking. "She died 20 years ago. A car accident. Samantha and I, we didn't make it after that. I couldn't bring myself to talk about it, and when I met you, Helena, I was trying to start over. You lied, I said, for years. You built a life with me on a secret. I didn't lie, he said quietly. I just didn't tell the whole truth. I laughed, not out of humor, but out of disbelief. That's not how truth works, Evan. We stood there, the silence thick between us, surrounded by the chirping of birds and the quiet lap of the lake. I was going to get rid of it all, he admitted. That's why I was out so much lately, trying to decide what to do with the past. But someone left me the key, I said, not you. His eyes widened slightly. What? It was taped to the door while you were gone. Evan looked at the house, then at the shed. His hands trembled. I didn't leave it. Then who did? I whispered. That night, neither of us slept. Evan sat on the porch for hours, nursing a glass of whiskey and staring at the water. I sat inside, the photograph in my lap, replaying every moment, every word, every memory that now felt like a lie. The next morning, I returned to the shed. I kept digging through the boxes, letters, paintings. One drawing, labeled Daddy's Surprise Room, showed a dark figure in a corner, eyes red, smile crooked, a child's handwriting, and I nearly dropped it. Then I found something else. At the very bottom of one of the larger boxes, taped to a manila envelope, was a note. It looked old, yellowed at the edges, but the handwriting was recent. Don't trust him. My breath caught in my throat. Behind me, a soft creak echoed in the room. I turned. The shed door, which I had closed tight behind me, was open just a crack, and in the shadows beyond it was wet footprints.